You want to know how many, you're like saying as a compliment to yourself, which is fine, how many men the first non-football Sunday in months are proposing to their wives, let's go shopping for curtains.
This really happened in my house yesterday.
None under your age are doing that.
My age has got a lot to do with it. That's right. That's right. My wife and I lead these lives where like weeks go by where we don't hang out and do anything together because she's on this whacked out schedule, even though she works just 3 nights a week. It's long shifts, 13-hour shifts. And when she's got a couple days off, it sometimes takes her a while to adapt to normal people time. So yesterday we were both up. This is the way I told the story just now. We were up at the same time having coffee together, which happens like once a month. I'm not even kidding. And at some point she said, "What do you want to do today?" And I looked around the living room. I'm like, let's go get some new curtains. And she's like, okay. So I put some time in. I punched in and I did the work.
I'm a little bit jealous because all that happens in my marriage now on the weekends is we're just driving to different places all day.
Right.
Crossing borders and different sports. And I only have 2. But it still worked out like that.
Yep.
That's where we're at. Sal Capaccio with us now on the West Her Hotline. Sal, what have you been up to today?
I am leaving the stadium/field house right now, One Bills Drive, and we just wrapped up recording a interview with Joe Brady for our Always Game Day in Buffalo podcast. That is Matt Bove and me, of course. That will be up shortly, tonight, soon, and you can watch it on my YouTube page at Sal Sports. You can, of course, be subscribed and download and listen to it. We did 20 minutes with Joe Brady, about 20 minutes. I would say a lot of football stuff, of course, and then some other stuff just about his personal life and some fun questions about him and getting to know him a little bit. So it was very fun. And I'll also say Matt Bove disagrees with you, Bulldog. He would absolutely take 2 out of 4 points given the Sabres the next 2 nights. I say I would need to know where the 2 come from. If you guarantee me 2 tonight, I'm okay with it. If you don't, if it's not tonight, then I'm not. So I'm going to say I agree with you and say just let the chips fall where they may and let's go play.
Are you willing?
Understood. Tonight you can put Florida 10 down with like 20 some games to play. Like that'd be pretty. That's pretty good.
Are you willing to scoop yourself on this interview in any capacity?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing groundbreaking or shattering. Sorry, it'd be great if there was. But of course, we really just talked a lot about the vision, why he brought in the coordinators he brought in, the assistant coaches he brought in, what his vision is for the team defensively and overall relationships with players. I think that was really interesting. Towards the end, we talked about, this isn't, Joe started off his college coaching career at William & Mary as a linebackers coach. And, he's a younger guy, of course. He's 36 years old. And football's different. Coaching's different. Sports are different. I think in all respects, it doesn't matter what you're coaching anymore. This is not the 1970s or 80s anymore. And, I think that's why Bill Belichick was, towards the end of his career, wasn't nearly as effective. I think people just saw that you just can't coach people like that anymore. You got to have relationships. And I think one thing that really stood out to me about Joe today was him talking about relationships. He touched on just because you have relationships doesn't mean you can't coach people hard. And then, we talked about that a little bit, where that comes from and how you do that, how you navigate that. So I thought it was really interesting from that standpoint.
Somebody called me. I was by myself Friday. Mike had the day off, and someone called and made the point that they feel like Brady will allow the guys' personalities to come out more. Mm-hmm. And I did see a quote, I think attributed to Alec Anderson, sort of indicating the same. And I pushed back a little on the caller when they brought this up to me on the show, because I feel like McDermott, at least over the years, maybe he wasn't like this immediately, but I felt like it came across to me anyway, like he wanted guys to be themselves. Like I'm thinking about Trey White here, and just like let the personality out. It's part of the reason I think he was motivated to have the guys take turns standing up in the big meeting room and telling their stories, right? Like be yourself, be who you are. That's going to make us better. So I don't know. I don't feel like Brady should get credit for like that being a big departure, because I feel like that was already a strong area for McDermott, or have I got it all wrong?
No. I like what you're saying there. I agree with you. I think Sean really evolved about that. And it wasn't that he didn't want people to be himself. I think when he came in, you have to understand, and I know you guys know this, but he was coming from Rex Ryan, right? I mean,
Right.
like he knew he had to kind of really put his foot down early and be a certain type of coach. And he already is a little bit, I guess you'd say old
That
school
way.
in that regard.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that mattered for him the first few years. And I think that as it went on, and you remember last year, you guys remember this when we talked a lot about how Sean McDermott started to really open up a little bit more and became a lot loose. He's doing snow angels and stuff. I had an interesting talk with Sean about this. And, he said, as the guys got older, as the guys got more experience, it became more player-driven leadership. Yes, it's his team. He's the head coach, but it really became more Josh Allen's team. It became more Christian Benford's team and Terrell Bernard's team. And early in his tenure, it's his team. He's got to be that guy. He's got to have his thumb on every single thing. But I do think he allowed people to be themselves in that regard, which is, I always remember the quote that Jordan Phillips. Jordan Phillips said when he came back. Jordan Phillips, we asked him, why do you seem like you were always the best version of yourself here in Buffalo? And he said, because Sean McDermott allows me to be. And he said, as long as you're on time and respectful to people, you can be yourself. And that resonated with me. Like, That's how Sean treated it, right? And I agree with that. Now, I do think, though, and being around Sean, this is my fourth coach, right, fifth coach now, I think, that I've covered here with the Bills. There always came with Sean McDermott a bit of there's pressure all the time around him to kind of be a certain way and do the right thing. And I don't know how to put it, that I think maybe there's just maybe not that with Joe Brady. And I don't know how to explain it without sounding demeaning or critical, because I just think they're different personalities on how they go about their business on an everyday basis.
Exuded a certain seriousness, and you don't want to play around with people like that, especially when they're your boss. Just maybe Brady's a little bit more one of the boys, which doesn't have to be a bad thing. So in the end, or it's not the end, it's the beginning, like just in terms of Brady, what do you make of his personality? What kind of a leader do you expect him to be in these ways?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a leader that is, like, I'd say maybe like an open door guy, right? Where, hey, if you have an issue, you can go talk to him. He's going to be totally willing to talk to you about it. And I think he'll be very receptive to a lot of people and feedback and things like that. And I've always said, like, the challenge for me, what I want to see from Joe Brady, was I think Sean was really good in this regard, was when things start to not go right, how do you respond? When you have to have tough conversations, how do you respond? And he could be great at that. We just don't know that yet. The offense has been pretty self-sufficient under Josh Allen, but, Joe Brady gets a lot of credit, too. I mean, they are, fourth and second, respectively, or second and fourth the last 2 years in points scored. You want to give Joe Brady a lot of credit for that. But, he's got to have the entire operation now. He didn't have to deal with defensive players. He didn't have to deal with special teams. He didn't have to deal with coaches on the other side of the ball. That becomes a different dynamic. You're dealing with a lot of people in a highly, highly competitive environment with a lot of egos. And that's going to be, to me, that's the test of any football coach, any high-level sports coach, is dealing with those people and understanding when to have. He said something to us that I liked on the podcast that I will share. And he said, use me and Matt as examples. He said, maybe Sal's the type of guy that you got to kind of ride him and get on him a little bit and really have a tough conversation with him, where Matt might be the kind of guy where you got to have a shoulder to lean on and let him understand and have him kind of, spew his emotions to you a little bit and understand that. And he said, and that's the mark of having, those relationships. They matter in understanding that. And I agree with that. And I always said the same thing when I was a teacher, right? And much less being a coach. You had 30 kids in a classroom. They're all different. And some of them, you got to treat them, you got to treat each individual personality different because they are different. And you have to try to tap and get the most out of them because of that.
This is fresh in my mind, this subject, from watching the latest Miracle on Ice documentary on Netflix, which came out Friday night. It's great. All that stuff is usually great. But This is the moment in Miracle in the movie where Rob McClanahan gets hurt in the first period against Sweden, and Brooks just sort of lights him up in the dressing room between periods, like, what are you doing? Why'd you take your gear off? And they told that story in the documentary. It's like exactly what happened in the movie. And Brooks is like, he's long deceased, but there's an audio clip of him saying, look, I had him at Minnesota. I knew how to push his buttons, and that was going to work. And, basically he was in a rage when Brooks threatened him physically, or not threatened him physically, but just challenged him.
Right.
And, same principle, that everybody would be different. And the best coaches, I think, do it this way, where they know how maybe it's sort of weird how they do it sometimes, what you're not expecting, I think, as the player. But it seems to me that would be the most effective, not just have one manner of discipline or motivation. So good for Brady if he's thinking that way. It sounded like to me. Okay, so anyway, I recommend that documentary.
All right, noted. Sal, how do you feel? When we talked on Friday, we had the special teams coordinator, we had the offensive coordinator, and maybe a few other positional guys. Saturday morning, I think, is when we got the news on Leonard for the defensive side of the ball, and a lot of fans were waiting on that, a lot of attention on it, more so than the offensive coordinator. No offense to Carmichael, but it's Brady's offense. He's going to call plays. This guy's a support role for that, so good brain power. But a lot of attention was focused on what are they going to do? Sean McDermott's leaving. How big of a departure? And Leonard was at or near the top, it seemed like, of almost every fan's wish list in some order, with Jim Schwartz and maybe Raheem Morris. I think we talked about this on Friday afternoon. So they land Leonard, and just, I don't know, how significant a hire do you think that is?
I think it's very significant for a couple of reasons. Number one, to me, and this goes back to the very beginning, the very first press conference, things that were said, and the names that we started to hear filter out right away, Jim Leonhard. I mean, I just think this is such a difference and departure from what you've had under Sean McDermott as far as scheme and a certain way of going about, playing defensive football. I made the point today on the Extra Point Show, and I'll reiterate here, independent of if you thought you needed a new head coach, right? If you're Terry Pegula and you hit the proverbial playoff wall, if you had a problem with the offense, if you're Pegula and Brandon Beane, you don't give Joe Brady the job, right? I mean, there's no way.
Right.
If you think the offense had to be totally different, like they weren't reaching expectations, you don't give Joe Brady the job. So we know that they are okay with that. There is definitely, I think, an argument to be made that maybe they wanted a new head coach. But I think you could say they certainly wanted a new defense. And maybe that's more why Sean McDermott was fired, because if, let's just say, Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane say, look, we got to change everything we do on defense. We don't like the way the defense is played, and this has happened in this moment or that moment, the run defense, whatever it is, Sean McDermott's not changing his defense. I mean, that's how he made his bones. That's not where he is. He's not. We know about Sean. He's not going to go, and you're going to go and go, you got to change this and that, and he's going to be amicable to that. So I think immediately, now that I'm thinking back on it, there was always probably a plan here to say we got to have a different style of defense. And I think that's number one with Jim Leonhard. He represents a different style. He played under Rex Ryan. He coached under Vance Joseph. At Wisconsin, a lot of 3-4 hybrid, those kinds of things that we talk about, those buzzwords, right? And then number two, I think, is he was in demand. Joe really wanted him. And that comes out in our interview, by the way, that we talked with him about it. And Matt did an interview for Channel 7 that is going to be posting as well. And Matt said that was one of the things that really stood out to him, was how much Joe was just really gushing over getting Jim Leonhard, because other people wanted him and he wanted him. And I'll tell you guys this, I had a guy on the radio today, Bill Schmidt, who works in Green Bay, covers the Packers and the Badgers, and that's why I had him on to talk about Jim Leonhard. And he said people in Green Bay are really mad. Like they wanted Jim Leonhard badly. They know what he did in Wisconsin, and they were up close and personal. And they were upset that he didn't go to the Packers. Now they wound up getting Jonathan Gannon, who was a nice get for them, I think, at the end of the day. But I think that's why it's significant to me, Bulldog, which is you're representing something totally different than what you had, and I think very, very intentionally when I think back on it. And you're getting a guy that's really highly regarded here. We'll see. He's never done at the NFL level to call plays, but he's got a very impressive resume where he's been. And people really wanted him.
How much at this point, maybe it's too early to say, or maybe you're locked and loaded with an opinion on this, how much of an overhaul, if at all, will there be personnel-wise because of a different style of playing?
It's a tough question, because I think you have to have different pieces, but I think you're very limited in really a lot of things you can do. It doesn't mean you don't have pieces that already fit. I do think some fans and people that are talking about this are going a little too far. When I've read this weekend and over the last several days of this guy doesn't fit and that guy doesn't fit. Well, you can't just get rid of everybody. I mean, guys sign contracts and extensions, and you have people under contract for money that matters here. There's no doubt about it. And, oh, by the way, let's remember that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott did actually build a defense that has position flexibility. It was a big deal for them. Like, we've always talked about that. Talk about that on offense. Positionless players. I talked with Joe Brady today. Positionless players. We've talked about that a lot over the last several years. You know, Terrell Bernard trains at Mike and Will, right? I mean, he's a guy. He started it. So he'd be fine as an inside linebacker in a 3-4. He might be better suited to that than an actual 4-3 Mike linebacker, right? Cole Bishop can play safety and in the box and center field. We know that. So I do look at the front seven. I do look at the defensive line. I do wonder what kind of nose tackle you want. You can have a nose tackle that plays perfectly suited the way that Ed Oliver does. Or do you want more of a traditional 3-4 anchor that has to be buckled down a two-gap guy? And then you say, well, then where does Ed Oliver fit? You know, you can go down that road. So to me, Bulldog, I just think it's putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit here until we start to figure out a little bit more. But people have to remember that there are guys here that fit, and there's a lot of consequences that you just can't do anyway if you wanted to move on.
With Sal Capaccio, did we cover Carmichael here? I know we talked about Jim Leonhard.
I mentioned that he's not going to call plays. He's here as a support. Support. You
guys talked about it Friday because Bulldog asked Sal, like, what exactly will his job be?
Bulldog, I will tell you, I asked Joe Brady that question. So there you go. I asked him specifically what an offensive coordinator does. Actually, Matt asked him, but we talked about beforehand, so I'll give Matt the credit here. He asked him the question, but the point was, what does an offensive coordinator do when they're not the play caller? And I'll let people listen to it, but one of the big things is be ready to call plays, because Joe said there may be times where he's like, I need my play caller. I need my offensive coordinator to call plays because I'm being the head coach now, right? I mean, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but you know what I mean? Like, He's got to be ready to do that.
Another form of this, that always happens with yourself as you get older and, coaches, players retiring, all these different forms this takes. Sal mentioned, and I know this is true, how Carmichael has been a coach for a long time. I mean, he goes back to like 25 years. He's a month older than me.
It's amazing. So his resume reads like he's in his 70s. He's 54 years old. He goes back to Drew Brees in San Diego.
Marty Schottenheimer in Washington. We talked to Ross Tucker about that. He was the quality control coach for Washington. Yeah. Joe Pendry was on the staff.
Oh, boy.
In Washington.
There we go.
With Carmichael. All right. Yes?
Real quick, guys. Yeah, and then you guys, I'm sure you guys have, sent in updates in this. Maybe you've talked about Bobby April. You know the name, of course. It's Bobby April III, his son, who's joining the Bills staff. He's going to be, what is his position? He's going to be an outside linebackers coach. Oh. Then, and just to go back to something we talked about a minute ago with Jim Leonhard and the overhaul and all that. So those are hiring an outside linebackers coach. Bobby April III. Bobby April Jr. was the Bills special teams coach, coordinator, special teams coach of the year in the NFL a couple of different times. He was really good at it. Bobby April was on staff several years ago as well with the Bills when he was coming up through coaching as well. And then you have an inside linebackers coach, John Egawanru, who was here in Buffalo as well. And I make these points because, A, Bobby April, the name, but you don't hire an outside linebackers coach and an inside linebackers coach unless they're two totally different positions, basically, right? Because right now the Bills have a linebackers coach, now Holcomb, and guys get trained. And that's another clue on how this might ultimately start looking.
Right. Yeah, like I wonder, like Michael Hoyt's a player that comes to mind who, we barely got to know, but I feel like maybe if this leans a 3-4 way, Michael Hoyt maybe gets listed as a linebacker.
That's right. He's right now a defensive end, and that's right. And, and like Joe said during the podcast, people will hear, and we don't coach defense, you don't play defense, I should say, like the traditional 80s or 90s, 3-4, 4-3 like that. A lot of times someone says it's a 3-4, but all it is because a guy that's on the line of scrimmage stood up. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's a 4-3 because the guy put his hand down, and that's all it really is. And there's multiple ways to attack, there's no doubt. So I'm guessing when we hear from the coordinators, and I believe we're going to hear soon at least from Jim Leonhard and the others that have been hired, Jeffrey Rogers, the new special teams coordinator as well, I'm assuming you're going to hear the words multiple and versatile a lot when they talk.
Those are good buzzwords. So, yes. Mm-hmm. We're going to Paris next year, Sal. Browns Saints, October 25th. Schedule.
Okay, so Browns are the team. I know I heard that rumor. I saw the Saints. So that tells me, obviously AFC can be the away team. We know that. There's 8 international games. We know the Bills are not going to be the Paris game. What's the chances they're one of the other 7? I still think the Bills could very well be in play here for one of those other 7 games, no doubt about it.
Okay, but not Australia, not the Rams.
I don't see it. It could happen. I mean, they're in the window there, right? But,
Can't wait to dig into that. Just more completely unnecessary but rampant speculation about what the schedule will end up looking like is maybe my favorite thing.
It's on our business cards. Yep.
Anytime. Call me at home anytime. Thank you, Sal. We'll talk again soon.
You got it, guys. Thanks.
That's our Sal Capaccio on the West Her Hotline. His appearances are brought to you by New York's only outlet liquor. When you need to stock up, it's the place to buy a case. What's your outlet? Keep an eye for that It's Always Game Day in Buffalo podcast that's going to be dropping tonight with Sal and Matt Beauvais talking to the new head coach.
A part of me wants to take 2 points from these 4, and I'm not sure I really care which game it is, but I feel like it's a little bit – they deserve a little bit better than my saying, from me, than my saying, just split. Because they're pretty good.
They have lost 2 in a row pretty recently. But one of them was overtime. They lost a home game to Minnesota in overtime. Then the following Monday was a loss in Carolina that was on Martin Luther King Day. So it's been forever since they've lost back-to-back games. But again, they did get a point in one of them. I mostly I like how Sal separated. Like I think I can put Florida almost, they're not going to be dead, but that's a long ways, especially with how much, the traffic there is there still. But yeah, that's the main reason I didn't want to just give me a split, is because they've been running so hot that I don't think I want to settle for a split in any 2 games right now.
Yeah.
No matter who they're playing.
That's what I mean too.
Yeah.